Okay, so in this video, we're going to pick up right where we left off in the previous, but we're going to take a deeper dive into the JSON that was returned and actually getting more items to display. So just as a quick recap, in this render method, we added in this div container here, and then we're calling this render list async. Now, if you go to definition, which is another awesome feature in Visual Studio Code, tight with JavaScript, and I assume this is TypeScript that's enabling this, you can go to definition or peek to definition, very similar to C# in Visual Studio. Now, when we do this, on this render list async, what it's doing is that we brought in this environment type, and to determine when we're in local mode, it runs this mock, right? So if we go to the mock, basically all it's doing is calling this absolute URL. But if you go in the definition of this guy, no, that is the definition. I want to go into, so this is our mock client class, and this is the get method there. As you can see here, all we're doing is returning this static data. So now if we take a look at this guy, let's run this in. Oh, my gulp service already running. So if we take a look at this guy, I have two. This is my local host, and this is going to be my dev tenant. Desktop list title 1. Right, just pulling in this this title and then this ID. And if we want to expand on that, let's say if we want to add in 2 items in this array, let's go list title 2 with ID 2, save it. Now when I go back to my local workbench, I have 2 items, but when I go back to my dev site collection, I have the real data. So the mock client, the mock data is working as expected. So now if we go back, the mock list, and this is the one that makes the real data call. And basically all we're taking is, we talked about the page context, we talked about the current web, the absolute URL, and then for that web, for the current web, we're getting all the lists within that current web. In our case, it's the root web, and then it's going to make that call and return that JSON. Now, once the JSON is returned, it goes through another render, this render list method, this guy here. And then this is the guy that iterates through all the list items returned, spit them out here. And then once it saves it all into this local HTML variable, it finds this selector, and then it punches in all that HTML that was just rendered. And that selector is looking for this div tag here. So if we want to move this div tag, say for example, and again, I hate this nested in JavaScript because it's kind of hard to distinguish where things begin and where things end. But say for example, we want to spit out the list before we do the container and show all the properties on the web part. I'll just move it up there. Go back to my guy. This is my local. Interesting. I think my formatting's off now. Let me check my dev tenant. Yes, it completely got rid of the blue div. Let's see here. Let's move this above this guy here. I either have to go above the entire div, or I may have to go nest inside the container. Let's see. Let's take a look. Okay, so now it's spitting out no style, but again, I'm missing the rest of my web part. Let's try the container here. And then in my local, oh, did I miss the refresh? Refresh it here. Nope. So it seems as if, I don't know why, this may be a cycling thing. Let's put it back where it was. And then I'm going to do a Shift-Alt-F for formatting. Oops. Which is not going to help me here, right? This has to be manual. I think this may be that cycle issue that we talked about before, whereas it's not clear. So now I have to, let me get rid of one of these instances. There we go. So it's back to where it was at before, but something is, maybe I'm missing the method call that needs to be rendered prior to this call. I think it's, I suspect when we load that DOM or when we execute the render, I'm not sure why that's not working. It must be a formatting issue. Either way, so we're there. Let's make sure that our dev tenant is still updated. Okay, so we still have the properties, and then we have the list below. So now what we want to do, we want to bring in additional items from that JSON. So if we look at our interface, we should have access to title and ID already. So let's go down to the render list async and basically tell it to render out the ID. So let's go to definition. Actually, it's not render list async, it's render list, because this is the one that makes the decision if it's mock or real. This render list is the one that's going to spit out the real deal, the actual HTML. So let's go here. Let's do a new line. Let's just do a break here. And then add in another span and hit dot. And then the IntelliSense is going to let us know the available properties. And then we just get ID, save it. Go back to this guy, refresh. That's a manual refresh because I'm on my dev tenant. And there's our GUID. So as we know, if you're familiar with the REST API, you know there's more available options or features within the JSON return for lists. So let's take a closer look at that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fire up Firefox, and I already have it running here, but I'll walk through the process again. I personally use a plugin within Firefox called REST Client. And you can just grab that in as an add-in on there. And basically, in order to get this to work, because you have to be authenticated, or else this will be a major security issue if anyone can make these types of calls. So you have to be authenticated to your tenant. So in a separate tab, all I do is navigate to my dev tenant that I'm playing around with, my dev 01, or just log into your SharePoint tenant at all. You don't actually have to navigate to the site collection itself. Now, once you log into the dev tenant, you should receive a cookie in the browser, which is going to be your auth token, and then these calls will work seamlessly. So here's the actual JSON return, and basically the way the REST client is pretty straightforward. You specify the REST endpoint you want to call, and this could be anything. We just happen to use SharePoint, and then and for me, if I don't have this request header, let me remove this, and then I click send. By default, these endpoints return XML, and then XML, for me, that's a pain to read, and we're not dealing with XML, we're actually dealing with the JSON. So basically, I have already set up these request headers, but this is the notation you have to have. You probably want to pause the video and grab this if you're not familiar with it. You just want to do a request header, it's an accept header, and then it's application/JSON semicolon OData equals verbose, no spaces, okay? Now, once you execute that and then click the send request, again, as long as you're logged into your tenant, you should not get a 403, an access forbidden, or another error because it's just taking that authentication token from your cookie locally and then making that request on your behalf. Now, once we have this is going to be a little bit hard to read. There's actually other plugins that allow you to collapse, hide, and collapse the different nodes within this JSON, which makes it a little bit easier to read. Because what's going to happen in this JSON is going to have all the list information for every list in this root site collection. In this root web for my dev 01 site collection. And it's going to spit out information about those lists. So what I want to do, I want to scroll down. If you're kind of looking at this JSON here, to here I'm already nested, and this is giving me the information for custom actions. So I don't want to look at that. I'm going to stay roughly around this level here, just scrolling through. Okay, and these are going to be all the additional attributes or properties returned from a list. So we have the title here, and then the ID is going to be this GUID, and these are mapped directly to the interface that we defined, which is pretty slick because we didn't have to create any additional code that says, for this ID and the JSON, map it to this ID property on the interface. So it seems as if we can just go in the interface and just add in these additional items. So let's bring in the image URL. Now let's bring in something a little bit more interesting. Let's bring in document template. Oh, this may be interesting. Let's bring in, I know you're saying, Deshaun, just pick one for Christ's sakes. Let's bring in description. Let's bring in description. Okay. So all I'm gonna do is copy this because I don't want any typos to get in the way. And then let's go back to Studio. And basically, from what I learned, all you have to do is just drop this guy in, type it string, semicolon. Let's hit save. I got a build error. Oh, yes. Interesting. So, yes, I forgot about this. So when you add in, so for this SP list interface, we're adding in the additional properties from the JSON that we want to display. But because we have that mock client, this guy here, you have to, any new field that you add, you have to add in the mock data to represent it. Just description. Actually, let me move this to another line so this array is a little easier to manage. Actually, let me move all of them to a new line so I can get my indentation here. Okay, so the first item should be taken care of. IntelliSense is kicking in, so I think I'm on the right track. Okay, so now if I save this, build is happy, build succeeded. So now if I go into the actual data, this is the tenant. It didn't display. And if I go into the mock, you should be able to tell me why this is not displaying. It's not displayed there as well. So if I go back to the web part, we added it to the interface, so it's loading, it's hydrating these objects with this property, but we're not spitting it out. So if we go to list sync, and then from there go to render list, and then this is our method that actually spits out the details. So let's add in another break here. Just copy this line. Awesome. Description's there, IntelliSense. Save it off. Let's go back to our guy now. This is my local. Test description, test descript 2, right? This is what we hard coded in our mock. So we're good there. Go to the actual tenant, hit refresh. Here's the description data for all your lists. So very awesome, very easy to work with, very easy to extend, right? But you have to understand what's available, and I think that's where this REST client really comes into play, just to see what's available in the REST API. Now, of course, obviously, you can go out to MSDN and look at the REST API, object model and have all the details there. But one of the things that I found is that the REST API and we're dealing with the out-of-the-box REST API, it's not going to be as closely to the server-side object model that we're accustomed to, especially compared to CSOM. CSOM API, when you're dealing with the list object, may give you more capabilities, may give you more methods, more available properties for the list object itself. Dealing with REST API, and this is changing over time, it's going to be a subset of that. But Microsoft, especially with O365, they're constantly adding more capabilities and more API options to all of these APIs. and I found that the documentation does not keep up. I think Microsoft just moving so fast that by the time it trickles down, propagates down to the folks that manages the MSDN website documentation, these capabilities may have been out there for a while. And it also depends on how your tenant is set up. So if your tenant is set up for first release, you may have more API capabilities there because that's where Microsoft released these changes to first. And then the standard release is when they figured out that it's working. They're taking all the feedback, either adjusted bugs or added new capabilities or made their needed adjustments, and then started to schedule the rollout for standard. So I always think that this REST client looking at the actual JSON that's returned versus trying to look at the documentation is probably a better route to go. And then it's really dependent on your tenant settings as well and how fresh or how new it's going to be. Okay, so what else do we want to do here? Let's spit out created date. Now I'm interested to understand if we want to use created date here. I'm gonna just paste, should this be a date time guy or date guy? Or should this be a string? Let's see what happens here. So if I save it, I'm going to get the error, and we know why. So we go into the mock client, put in created. Oh, this is going to get interesting. 2016 09 01. Is that a valid date? No. Let's do this as string. So in the JSON, how does this come back? Let's see. In the JSON, oh, this is in quotes, so let's treat this as a date. Let's see, let me copy this. Let's see if this works. No. It's not buying it. So even though I specified the date, oops, I copied twice, sorry. So even though, it doesn't seem to be buying that. Let's see what happens. I still have to specify this in quotes, even though I specified the date type. What is it complaining about? Oh, it's not an assignable type. I don't think I have the right. Let's just try string. I'm just not familiar with all the different type options you have at this level. So let's try string. Of course, this is going to work for my mock. Okay, so let me go here, but it's going to be interesting when I do the real data. Oh yeah, it's not going to spit it out because I didn't specify. It's not in my render. So let's go here to the render. Now tell it we want created. Now if I go to, I'm still complaining that it's not assignable. Did I save it? Oh no, I didn't save it. There's my solid dot. So let me save it. All right, build successful. Render. Okay, I get the date now. I know I can go in there and format that to, any date format. And if I hit refresh, let's see if the JSON maps to their property. Okay, cool. So it seems to be mapping, and these are all different values. So I assume this is real data. Okay, great. Okay, so so that's that. So I think we kind of get the gist of how to add in additional properties for the list object itself. Now, the way that we're getting this is that we're specifying which web to grab this list data. Now, one of the things I always was interested in was that if we use a different site other than the current web, will we run into any authentication issues? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up 2 variables within this method, and then I'm going to specify a different site collection or a different web. So site 1 is going to be the local, right? And this is going to be dynamically generated as we were doing before. I'm going to just set it to a local variable. But the second guy, site 2, I actually want to pull in from my root site collection. So let's take a look at that. So in my case, my root site collection, let me just go to the SharePoint homepage, and then SPClassroom, this is going to be my root site collection. So I'm going to just copy this guy here, and then format this as underscore API web list. And I know I'm mixing and matching single quotes and double quotes, so let me just make everything single quotes. Okay, so basically what I'm saying for site 2, just go to my root, do the exact same call, right? Bring in the list for the root web on my root site collection versus the current web, which is going to be my Dev01 site collection. Now, because I am the owner of this tenant, I should have access to the root as well. So let's try this, because I know like when in the app you had to run certain things were ran in the app context, but I'm not sure if that was because we were using the permissions of the app. You know, when you install an app, you had to grant, you had to say yes, allow or grant permissions, and then the developer specify which permissions that app required. But also behind the scenes, it was also handling the tokening piece. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this handles the token piece when you're not running in the context of the current web. So for this get, all I'm going to do, first I'm going to do is site 1. I just want to make sure that we didn't break anything. Save this all. So let me go back. Where's my real site collection? Okay, so where's my Dev01 recent? Interesting. My recent site, my Dev01 is not popping up in my recent. Let's go back. Here we go. So this is my Dev01. Let me hit refresh. Okay, so everything seems to be working there. And now if I go back to my local tenant, hit refresh, we obviously do not expect the change here. So now, let me just take a closer look at these. I don't see anything unique on here to help me determine if this is a Dev01 site versus my root site. All right, let's just try it. So let's go here, back to the get list data, the real list data, and change this guy to site 2, save it off, hit refresh. Again, this looks the exact same because, oh, here we go, Deshaun123. So let's do this. Let's go ahead under this root. Let's go ahead, Deshaun Clark 123. So it definitely seems like it's pulling this in. But let's go ahead and create one. So I'm at the root, and I'm going to go to site contents, new list, and I'm going to call it Deshaun Live Demo. Okay, this is a test from the live demo, and then hit create. Okay, so this guy is created. So now if I go back to my dev tenant, hit refresh, seems like these are in alpha order. Deshaun's live demo, this is a test from the live demo. Excellent. So it's definitely pulling in. So now it seems like you have access to, well, the current user, if they have access to other site collections, you're not bound to, these web parts are not bound to the current site collection. They can pull in data from any other site collection that the current user has access to, which is very sweet, very sweet. Because now you can set something up as, in this web part, pull in a web part property to where they can specify which site collection or which web, just the URL, and then be able to pull in the list data from that particular URL, getting a lot of reuse out of this web part. So this is actually pretty sweet. There's one other thing I do want to add. Let's add in the item count, which I think will be useful. So now if we go to, so item count, this is a property on the list object returned by the JSON. And then if we go to, let's see here, our interface, I just assume all of these will be string. I just assume, I don't know. Because, we have a date object, we have, this is going to be an int, or a long. All right, so let's just add item count as a string for now. Save it, we're going to get the build error. Go into the mock, add in item count, and then just specify, I'm going to just 999. Is force them to use the string. Okay. Save this. Okay, my build looks great. So now let's go into the render, add this guy in so it's spitting out in the HTML. Actually, let's move this up. Let's move this one right under title. Or actually, you can just be, let's just put in parentheses next to title. And as you can see, this is very easy to, there we go, to bring this in. Just adding, if it's in the JSON, you just update your interface, make it type safe, update the mock. That may be a pain in the butt, because every time you're making changes, you have to update the mock, you have to shadow them in the mock. But if you're doing unit testing, I think that may be, I guess that's a good thing, right? Okay, so let's go. So this is my real data. Let me hit refresh here. Now for every title in parentheses, it should show me the count for that particular list. And if we go to this Deshaun Live demo, 0. So let's go ahead and add an item. And then fake title, no attachment, another fake title, and another fake title. So I'm adding in 3, right? So there's my 3 items. Now if I go back, refresh, that's pretty awesome. That's actually pretty awesome. Now I want to kind of plug in, do something fancy, just because I think that as far as like pulling in data, displaying data, this is actually pretty straightforward. So I'm liking this a lot. So let's do this. Let's in the next video, let's take this one more step, and I think it'll be pretty cool if we can get a web part property to where the user can specify which web to bring in, and we leverage that to display the list for the specified web. And it can be anything. It can be a root web, it could be a sub web, it could be any web that that they have access to. And if they specify that, it will go ahead and get it. So that way we're not hard coding it. So we'll do that in the next video. But as of right now, to add in additional information, to add in information from a different site collection, from a different web, is actually pretty cool. It's actually pretty cool. And TypeScript helped us from having a lot of runtime errors because we're catching those during the build cycle. So this is pretty cool. So okay, so that's it for this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one where we actually try to play around with adding in web part properties to dynamically pull in this data. Okay, talk to you then. Take care.